So welcome to Math Routines and Games for pre-K to grade 5 for our second session, so part 2. I'll share with you some different routines today and some different games that were not in the first session. Let's start by sharing my screen. And then I'm also going to open a few pieces on my desktop so I can see what I'm sharing. Great. So I am Jen Robital. I'm the elementary math specialist, so I focus on pre-K to grades 5. Michelle Mea, our secondary math specialist, is also here with us today. And so if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to type them into the chat box. Michelle will be monitoring that so that we can answer any questions. So we're going to start by looking at 3-act task. Actually, let me go back to my agenda here. I knew there was one somewhere. We're going to start by looking at 3-act tasks. We'll then look at a routine called Splat and then Esti-mysteries, and those two are both found on the same website, and I'll share those with you. We'll look at Subitizing cards, or a quick image look, and talk about why those are important. I'll share with you a website that has several different SolveMe style puzzles. And then we'll talk about some games that can be played with just a regular deck of cards. And we'll talk about ways that we can incorporate these games or even these routines in a whole class setting or in an asynchronous setting where students may access this work at different times. So we're going to start with that 3-act task. And I'm going to feature a 3-act task from Graham Fletcher's website, gfletchy.com, but I'll also show you another site where you can find some 3-act tasks. And so a 3-act task is a set of 3 distinct parts that give students an opportunity to readjust their thinking throughout the process. So in Act 1, we're trying to engage the students. We have them make a prediction about what they think might be either asked for or what might happen. In Act 2, we start giving students some more pieces of information. We find out what they might like to know more about, and we'll reveal those details. And then we allow students to adjust their thinking or their prediction. And then the 3rd act is talking about the strategies that they may have used, as well as the reveal or the solution to the problem. And they're usually set up with a quick video clip, and then some images, and then a final video clip. So the one that we're going to do today has to do with this piece of string. And so I'm going to just share with you. I'm not going to give you much information. I'm just going to share with you this first act, the video. So you've been given very little information about this video or the task at hand. And so now, what questions might I ask? What are some things that I could ask you about that video? And you can either unmute and share them, or you can type them into the chat box.
How many knots could you tie in the rope?
Okay, I might want to know how many knots I could tie in that rope.
I was thinking something about like if there's string shorter or longer, something to do with the length of the rope.
Okay, so maybe how long the rope might be, or maybe could there be more knots or less knots based on the length of the rope? Okay, so I'm going to ask, how many knots will fit on the rope? So that is what the task is going to be today. Some of the videos, there's many more kind of ideas that you might ask or questions you might ask about the video. This one is more straightforward. So make an estimate. How many knots do you think will fit on that rope?
8.
Okay.
I often encourage students to make a really low estimate and a really high estimate.
So that's my next point was what's too high of an estimate and what's too low of an estimate. So what would be too high?
100.
100. What would be too low?
1 or 2.
Yeah, because we've already seen him do like 3. I think we saw him do 3 or 2 and he was starting on the 3rd one, right? So then I might ask, what other information would you need to know to make a better estimate? So what are some wonderings that you have about that video that you saw that would help you?
How long was the rope?
How long was the rope?
How much shorter did it get when they tied the first knot?
So
Oh, that's good.
essentially, how much did one knot take up, right? So how much did the rope shrink by adding 1 knot? Okay. Anything else?
Are all the knots the same size?
Nice. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information. And in a classroom, you would kind of spread this out. It would take a little bit longer. You'd be having a discussion with students. So I'm going to give you some information. And hopefully you can see it there, the length of the rope with no knots. So when he measures that out, it is 112 centimeters or 44 inches, or approximately 112 centimeters and 44 inches. And then I'm going to give you some more information. With 1 knot, the length of the rope is approximately 40 inches or approximately 102 centimeters. So do you think you have some information now where you could make and adjust your estimate? Make a better estimate?
Yeah.
So why do you want to change your estimate?
I don't think I want to change mine because I think I had guessed 11. So,
Okay.
and I am thinking that there are 4, and each knot was about 4 inches. 4 times 11 is 44. So I think I want to keep my estimate.
So you used it to justify the estimate that you already had.
Yeah.
And then the person who had 8 as their estimate, did you want to adjust or change your estimate?
I think I would change it to a little bit more, like maybe 10.
Okay.
But because the knots probably won't be right next to each other, I still think maybe not as high as 11.
Okay, so maybe there'll still be a little bit of space. Okay, so we're seeing some agreement there. So now do you want to see how close you were? So right, we've built up this like, oh, there's some strategies and we think we know what the answer could be, but we also like the justification of some of the other answers, like maybe we've changed our mind a little bit. So now we're going to get to see the reveal. So he did fit 11 knots onto the rope or through with that rope. So just a way to engage students, right? We're talking about the strategies. So when we talked about the strategy of how you got the 11, Angela said that she didn't want to change her estimate because she figured out there was, about 4 inches per knot. And then she said, well, 4 times 11 is 44, which we know is the length of the rope. So that was the strategy that you used. Maybe somebody divided, right, by a 4 or subtracted 4. A student might subtract 4 until they got to 0 if they weren't sure. But this always starts with that hook and engagement. You are given that other information, a chance to readjust, and then you get to see how close you were. In all the time, you're having a conversation with students about their strategies. And so you could do this as a whole class, you know, sitting together, or even if you're on doing a virtual class, you could do all this work together. Or you could actually post parts of this throughout an asynchronous type learning setting. So if you were using something like Google Classroom, maybe you post the first video on Monday and students make their estimates. And then on Tuesday, if they're coming back on, or whenever they get to come on the next time, you've gathered what other information they want to know. And then the next time that they come on, you're sharing some pieces of information, and then eventually you can share out the video. So they don't all have to be together. You may also set up something like a Google form, and you can embed videos into a Google form. So you could embed video number 1 and ask students to make their estimate and explain why they chose their estimate. And when they click next, it could go to another page where you then give them the additional information and ask them to refine their estimate. And then they could click next, and on the next page you can embed the last video. So it's a way that students could access this one at a time, and don't need to have the support of the teacher or the class there while they're sharing that. I do want to jump to show you where gfletchy.com, where that website is, and Michelle has posted that for us in the chat box. Here is the website, gfletchy.com. When you click up here at the top, it says 3-act tasks. So when you click that, there are a bunch of different 3-act tasks. It also tells what standards they link to and the big idea of the video, so that you don't have to open it with it. Make sure that it's what you want before you're opening it. And then it's also the ideas of what do you wonder about in this task. If you notice at the top here, there's actually some recording sheets for grades K2 and 3-5, and those ask for that too high or too low estimate, and it gives them a place to do the work. They're a very blank page, other than they kind of are a guide for students to write down and share their work. But as you scroll down through, you can see that we have kindergarten, 1st grade, moves on to 2nd grade. I believe this is the one I just did, the naughty rope. But there's all kinds of tasks, and when you open a task, so the naughty rope, I'll open that. When you open it, it gives you the video here so that you could watch the video. It talks about the questions that students might ask, or what you're expected to do through this act. In Act 2, here are the 2 picture clips. So if I click on them, I get the picture. And this is the 2nd picture. And then here's Act 3. And so if you wanted to use this outside of this website, you can download the task, and it opens up into a folder on your computer, and it has the video clips and the pictures right there, so that you could then move them to wherever you would want to put them, if you wanted to put them in a Google form, or just share them in a different way. You can also save them to your desktop, or like I did, I embedded the video into my PowerPoint, so I didn't need to be connected to the internet to share it with students. Another website that you can find 3-act tasks on, see if I can. Here, if you Google 3-act tasks with Dan Meyer, I particularly like, it's the 3rd one that shows up here, but it's a Google Doc spreadsheet that has these 3-act tasks. And these are more for middle school and high school level. But again, they're set up the same way. You have your 3 acts. Some of them have a 2nd part to them, but it shows what standards and what math practices it might connect to. And as you scroll over, here's your suggested questions. So, but again, that's more for middle school and high school age. Graham Fletcher really focuses on the elementary age span. And any questions about a 3-act task? All right, we're going to move on to the next routine is Splat. And so Splat is a routine where students are given a visual of an amount or quantity of dots, or they could be fractional pieces. And then there is a covering, a splat, that covers over the dots. And so if you look at this image here, this is just one kind of snapshot from one of these splat routines. This number up here in the top tells me what the value is of the whole picture. And so when these splats came down, this one would have been a dark splat and you wouldn't have been able to see underneath it. In this case, this one's called a nested splat. So if I saw the number 12 in the corner and then I see that there are 3 visible, I then would figure out that there were 9 that were hidden. And so when I revealed and cleared out this large splat, I now see that there's 4 visible, and that must mean that there's some quantity still hidden underneath this purple splat, because I knew there needed to be a quantity of 9. So since there are 4 out, it means there would be 5 underneath that splat. This splat here is a splat with fractions. So if the whole value here is 7, I can look at my wholes as well as my fractional pieces, and I can see that I have 3 1/4 that are visible. So if I have 3 1/4 that are visible, I know that there are 3 3/4 that are still not visible, so they must be underneath the splat. And then this splat routine here is like multiple splats. So in this case, I know the value is 19, and I can see that there are 7 here. So if there are 7 visible, then it must mean there are 12 that are hidden. And since these splats are all the same size and color, they each are worth the same amount. So if I have 12 that I know are hidden under the splats, and since there are 4 splats, 12 divided by 4 is 3. There must be 3 holes, 3 blue dots under each of the splats. So we're gonna go through a very basic splat routine first. Actually, I think I'm only sharing one of them today, but I'll show you where you can find all of these splat puzzles. And they are already pre-done for you. They're actually done in a PowerPoint slide, or some of them are also set up in Google Slides. So you just have to pull the routine off, and it's already pre-made for you, and you can click through the slides.
I tried to do it. You mentioned this in one of the other trainings, and I tried to do it, and it said I had to sign up. So I signed up, and now I get his newsletter and stuff. But I couldn't get it to work. So I'm hoping that you can show me how to make it actually work, because I had wanted to do it play with a kid.
Yeah, we'll walk through one. I've never had to sign up for his site. I've just been able to download them. But we'll walk through downloading one when I pull up the web page, and we'll see how it goes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so first we're going to start with, how many blue shapes do you see? Splat, right? I don't want to give students enough time to actually count all of the splat, all of the pieces, because we're working on trying to figure out, and I don't want them to be able to have counted and memorize how many are there. So I'm going to kind of move through that kind of quickly, but again, I would go, okay, here it is. I'm now covering up some, but this number that's in the top right corner tells me that there are 10. So we know that the value is 10. So then we'll walk students through, well, then how many shapes are under that splat? And we'll ask students, how do you know? So some students may say, well, 10 take away the 2 that we see is 8. Some might say 2 plus something is 8, so they may count up, 2 plus something is 10, so they may count up and find that there are 8. And once we have talked about the strategies and why students think they know what's underneath that splat, we'll say, let's look underneath it. And then it kind of shades out, and so we can see and we can count that there are 8 blue dots still underneath that splat. But the important part here is, what did we learn from this, right? So we can see that 2 plus 8 is 10, or 10 minus 2 is 8. We can figure out these different number families of the ways that number relationships happen. And so let me take you to his website and I'll show you where those splats are, and we'll walk through one of them there. So the website is stevewyburney.com. And when you go to this website, I do have to say, there are a lot of ads that pop up. They're all educational or Google-friendly ads, but you can just close out of them. And as we scroll down through his pieces, we're going to come back to Esti-mystery in a few minutes, as well as the Subitizing slides. So it depends on whether or not you're trying to open them up as Google Slides. So if you're trying to open them as Google Slides, you can click here to download them. If you want to use PowerPoint, we can keep going down. Here's some nested splats. So this was like one of the examples that I shared. I would click on this and it will open. I'm going to go to the next page. Here are the fractional splat series. So if I want fractions, I can go there. And each fraction is a different color. So the fourths are red. I believe thirds are green. And so the fractions, by seeing the different colors and recognizing the different values of the colors, I believe he only uses one fractional piece per splat. So it's either going to be fractions in fourths or fractions with thirds in a different splat. As I scroll down, this one here's this one that says just splat is the one that has a variety of splats on it. So I'm going to click on that. And as I scroll down, there's actually a video that he shares, a quick video about the splat routine. And then we get into splats through 10. So this was like the one that I shared, the 2 and 10. So it was within 10. And so those are your 1.1 through 1.5. So those are each different splat routines. This one here is splats through 20. So the numbers are through 20. Multiple splats. One called instant splat, where I think we're trying to figure out the number, so we must be given some other information here. And then they come into two different colors. Different colors mean that they have different values, so you might start thinking about them like variables. Again, there's some more two-color splats. This one here now are different colors and different quantities of splats, so we're figuring out how much must be underneath this like yellow one in this case. And then we start to see the dots have different values on them. So he has lots of different splat routines. So they really do increase, and you can use them with upper level grades as well. But let me go back down to one of the splats.
Is the splat the 3.1? So does that mean like a grade level 3, or is that just a?
It's kind of like level 3. So like level 1, we're just to 10. Level 2 is to 20. Level 3 is the one where it has multiple splats. So they really don't have like a grade level. It's just a different category for them. Good question. So I'm going to click on this 3.1, and it downloads it as a PowerPoint. So let me see if I can open it. And so when it opens, I have to enable editing. And I believe I can go right to showing it from the beginning. So as I click through, all the parts are there. So if it didn't download correctly, Lynn, were you trying to use it in Google for Google Slides?
I clicked on like the 1.1.
Yep.
I opened it, but I didn't like download it and enable editing and all that stuff.
Okay, so you have to actually download it, and then once you enable the editing, it should run like it's a PowerPoint, and it's already, the actions are already there, so that you don't even have to do anything. All those pieces are there already.
Okay. There was, I did make some slides with have frequency words for some of my other kids. And when I couldn't share those on on Zoom. So I don't know if I'd be able to share this on Google Slides.
I know that the slides, if you are using the ones that are not meant necessarily for Google Slides and they open in PowerPoint, they don't transfer and work quite as nice in Google Slides.
Okay.
So the ones that he has designed specific for Google Slides are the ones that you would want to go to. And that was just a different link in there. It says Splat for Google Slides.
Mm-hmm.
And when
Okay.
you're sharing in Zoom, make sure you share your screen in order to share the PowerPoint with your participant.
So if we're gonna use it in Zoom, then we should use the PowerPoint version.
You don't have to. If you're used to using Google Slides, you could download the Google Slides and share your screen. You would just be sharing Google, sharing it from Google.
Okay.
And some of the security or safety protocols now in Zoom, if you're not the one running the meeting, you may have to enable that you can allow someone to share their screen, because some of the accounts, that's kind of a default now. Since most of us have been home using Zoom, they've changed some of those safety protocols. So that could be part of why it didn't share as well. I'm gonna escape out of that one. And so I'm back to my PowerPoint now. So that's the Splat, and we'll go back to Steve Wyborny's website in just a moment because I want to share with you another routine that he has on his site called Esti-mysteries. So also from stevewyborny.com. And in Esti-mysteries, students are working on their estimation skills. And so in this problem here, I want to know how many airplanes are in the bowl. So I want you to think about, and I want you to, you've got a piece of paper, just write down how many do you think are in the bowl. Make an estimate of how many you think are there. Okay. So I'm now going to share with you some clues to help us narrow down how many there may actually be. So the first clue is that the answer is an odd number, so it's part of the pattern 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. So if your estimate that you made was not an odd number, you might want to adjust your estimate. Clue number 2, the answer does not include the digit 5. So if you had an estimate that you had either 50 something or something with a 5 in the ones place, you may have to adjust your estimate. Clue number 3 is the answer includes the digit 1. And clue number 4 is that the answer is between 40 and 70. So now you may have to really adjust your estimate because we know a lot more information about how many airplanes there are. And with an Esti-mystery, I would always make sure that you check the Esti-mysteries and you check through those clues and make sure that your students would understand what those clues mean. If you haven't talked about odd numbers or even numbers, they may not get clue number 1. So it's something you want to make sure that you do understand the vocabulary that's offered in the clues. Some have recommended maybe giving students a hundreds chart if they needed that to help them if we know that the number is less than 100. You could use a hundreds chart for it, or if you know that it's going to be more than that, you might give them a number grid to help them. You also may notice there could be multiple right answers. However, once we narrow down the numbers, we then would have to, or our estimates, we narrow them down to maybe a couple of options. Students are asked to make their best estimate out of what's left, right? So how many airplanes do you think there are?
41.
41 or 51 or 61.
Okay. So after seeing all the clues, we've narrowed down the possibilities. Write down your final estimate, and then explain to someone why you chose this number, so students can have that math talk. They can have a conversation, maybe a turn and talk. And then you get to the reveal, and there are 41 airplanes. So nice job. I do think this was probably one that falls in the like kindergarten through second or third grade. It's one of the earlier ones. It's a really much more basic Esti-mystery. Let's see, I'm going to take us back to Steve Wybarney.
No videos for those, it's just a picture.
They are PowerPoints as well. So when I go back to stevewybarney.com and I click on this 51 Esti-mysteries. So when I click on it, this here is just a picture to kind of talk you through the routine, and it kind of goes through and see you have clue number 1, 2, 3, 4, and so you see that picture. But as you scroll down, they start right here, level 100, so his 100 Esti-mysteries are grades K through 2, and so it gives you a title, but when you click it, it just downloads it. You have to download it and open it to know really what the puzzle is. But there's a bunch of 100 levels, so those are your K2s. As you scroll down further, you get to your level 200, so they're a little bit more challenging, grades 1 through 3. And then you get your 300 levels are grades 3 through 8. 400s are grades 3 through 12. Let's see, if I find, I'll open this flying cars one just to show you. Again, it opens in PowerPoint. I don't know that he has them set up for Google Slides. I think right now they're only in PowerPoint. And if you have a Mac, I think you can open PowerPoint presentations in Keynote. I think they'll open. But again, it opens as a PowerPoint. I'm going to enable the editing. And then I can edit or change things. The actions are already there. So when I click on like this page here, it shows all the clues, but when I actually show the slideshow, it just appears as clues and you can click through and have one clue at a time. So the actions are already built into his presentations. So you would just click through them. So in a way you could use this if you were not all together in a class. Maybe you work either in Title I or in a special ed room where you just want to give them one clue a day. So on Monday, you might give them clue number 1. So I was thinking like Title I or even a special ed room, you could make a bulletin board with this and you could put up one clue today and another clue tomorrow and another clue the next day. And so kids eventually get into that wanting to know what that next clue is. And a lot of them have 4 clues. Some of them have 5. But on that last day, maybe you pull the kids all together and say, okay, let's do the reveal together. And so you could do that in an asynchronous setting as well. If you were using like Google Classroom or even Seesaw. Some teachers are using Seesaw with their students. You could just post a clue a day and kind of get them engaged in wanting to know what that next clue is because they want to figure it out. So it's a way to have buy-in for the students. So I'm going to close out of that PowerPoint and we're back to my PowerPoint here. Are there any questions about Splat or Esti-mystery? Okay, if there are, feel free to write them in the chat box if you'd like. So back to this one. So subitizing or quick images. Subitizing is the ability to know how many there are without having to count the individual items. So for instance, when we look at a number die, and we see a dot pattern, and we look at those dots there, we know that that's 5. We don't have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We just know by looking at that represents 5. And so we want to build that idea of subitizing or knowing how many for students. And so this is a way that we can do that. So if I look at this, I also know that there are 5 without having to count every single dot. And children and adults might see this differently. some might see and just say, I know that's 5. Some might see 2, 2, and 1 more, right? So they may not recognize it as 5, but they can put the parts together and know how many without counting. So I'm going to show you a quick image. So for instance, there's the image. How many did you see?
7.
And how did you see that?
I saw it as like 3, like, and then 3, and then 1 in the.
Okay. Did anybody see it differently?
I saw 2, 3, 2.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the image. So we saw some saw 3, 3, and 1 more. Some saw 2, 3, 2, right? Maybe somebody saw 4, use 4, and then 3 more. Maybe you saw 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, right? So it's all about how kids see these dot patterns, and having students talk about these images and how they see them helps teach others what to look for in patterns within these images. So we can see how many. How did we see them? We all see them maybe differently. So I'm going to give you another one now. Here's the next image. So how many were in that?
30.
And how did you see that?
6 groups of 5.
6 groups of 5. So these images aren't just for our, kindergarten, first grade learners who are working on learning small numbers. They can actually be used for our older students, or like I picture this in 3rd grade when we're first starting to work with our multiplication facts, right? So I know if a student says 30 because they saw 6 groups of 5, that they know that multiplication fact without having to give them a pencil paper test, right? And they're starting to recognize those images. And so we can really surprise ourselves by knowing how many without counting, and we don't think about that. So if I click forward here, I've got another one for you. How many were there?
There was 7 in each group, but I didn't get the number of groups.
Did someone get the number of groups? I'll go back.
Also 7.
Also 7. So how many dots are there?
49.
And we don't have to count them. We just use our subitizing skills to recognize how many. And so when we think about that, we knew right away that there were 7 in each group. Maybe you saw the 6 and 1 more. And I think as adults, that's probably how we see it, because we recognize 6 because that's one of the sides of a die, and 1 more. And then when we look at this, you might have seen like 5 and then the 2 more. And so you knew that there were 7 there. You might have seen like 3, 3, and then the 1. But we can see them in different ways, but we all came to that understanding that there were 7 in each group. And then once we knew there were 7 groups, that there were 49. So this idea of subitizing is really a great thing to practice with students, to have them recognizing those numbers. So this could be as simple as you're getting in line to go someplace at school, and you hold up the cards and have kids talk about it. It might be something that you could start your day, or start a group. Your group comes to the floor for their mini lesson or their lesson, and you just start and do this as a warm-up to get ready for math class. Or it could be something that we do these quick images, a few of them, to get students to line up, right? After you've shared how you found it and how you saw it, you can go get in line. It also can be something that students can do with each other, kind of as a flashcard or something to practice. But it helps them practice recognizing how many. One of the websites that I want to share with you today is, it's put out by the EDC. It's solveme.edc.org. And I'm going to take you to that website. And on this website, once you get here to solveme.edc.org, we have these SolveMe puzzles, and there's 3 different types of puzzles. I'm going to start here in the middle with this Who Am I? So this one is web-based. It's not something that you can do outside of the web, whereas others, the Splat routine and the Esti-mystery, really you could take those, download them and use them. You could just put up a picture and use them. These really are a program or an app on the computer that you would want to use. But they're free to use. All of these websites are free to use. So when I click on the Who Am I and I click play, I now am going to kind of work through some of these puzzles. So if I click on a puzzle, let me see if I can. There we go. There we are. There's extra clues down here. For some reason, I've got this bar at the bottom of my screen. So the clues for this puzzle are: my value is even, my value is greater than 6, my value is less than 10. So students will use these clues, so much like an Esti-mystery, right? Except they're not estimating, they're using clues to figure out that, in this case, the answer would be 8. They put that in the box, and up here in the top right is a check. And when we check it, it says it was solved, it's right, I can go on to the next puzzle. So this one now, my value is even, my value is not less than 5, my value is less than 8. So the only even number that's less than 8 but is not less than 5 is 6. And I can check my answer. I got it right, and I can move on. There are, they do increase in difficulty. And then there are different, kind of just pick one here. My value is odd. The digits here are labeled, this one happens to be labeled T and U. And it says U is equal to T. So the digit that's going to go here in U is going to be the same digit that's in T. And the sum of my digits is equal to 6. So students really have to know some vocabulary. They do kind of increase in difficulty. But if I know that the 2 digits are equal to 6 and they both are the same value, then I know that each one has to be a 3. And I can check my work.
Do they always have 3 clues?
I believe there are. Let me see. I'll kind of pick this harder one here. This one has more. Okay. So this one is, yep. So, and this is also a 3-digit number. And then there's this puzzler section. So they get, I think, a little more difficult, and these have more clues here. They get into the master. So once you kind of work through, students might want to work through the explorer because those are the easier ones. They get into puzzler, which are more difficult. And then you get into the master ones are much more difficult. There also are some other ones that were built out. I think maybe people built them out and added them to the group to, if you save any puzzles, you can put them here. If you liked any of the puzzles, you could add them there. But there's some different options in here. So that's just the SolveMe, the Who Am I puzzle under the SolveMes. I'm gonna go back to the beginning here. This mystery grid, I'm gonna click on that and hit play. In a mystery grid, they're a little bit like a Sudoku. So I have these number tiles, and these number tiles are going to fill in the puzzle here. And this number up here tells me the value of the ones that are connected by the dark lines. So in this case, each of the dark lines is its own box. So I would know that the 2 goes here, a 6 is going to go here, which means the 4, and in each row and each column and each row, they don't repeat. So it's like the Sudoku in that way. So once I get all of the pieces put in, I can then check it and I can move on to the next puzzle. But I want to go to one that's a little different. So this puzzle here, the value of this one is 3, 2, I have 1 and 1. But now I need to figure out which pieces are going to go here. And so I have to use a little bit of a strategy. I can't have any more 1s in this column or in this column. or in this row. So the only other place that the 1 can go has to be here. And then I can start to fill in, like the 2 would go here, which means the 3 goes here. Okay. They also increase in difficulty. This was just a 3 by 3. We now up here get into 4 by 4s. I think some of these here show the value of these 2 boxes added together because they're in the same dark rectangle. When I add them together, the value of these 2 are 25. But it doesn't tell me, I know that 9 plus 16 is 25. It doesn't tell me which box they have to go in. So I've got to use the other clues to figure out and solve this. So this is how they're starting to increase in difficulty. And then they get into some much larger ones. And again, you have your explorer, your puzzler, and your master section there. So just a good activity for students who need that challenge or could accept that challenge. Maybe they've completed their work and needs a challenge to do. And then these
Are those printable?
you probably could take a screenshot and print it. You could do that. And then this mobile, I'm gonna hit play. I'm going to pull this one first here. So the value of my mobile here is 10. And a mobile needs to be balanced, right? So you want to keep it from tipping. So in this case, if it's 10 and I know that there's only 1 item here and 1 item here, I know that the value of each of those has to be 5. Okay. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to pick something like this one. And now, I don't need the tutorial. If I know that each heart, so this time they don't give me the value of the mobile, they give me the value of a heart. And so I know that the heart is worth 2. So if this is 2, 2, and 2, this side is worth 6. Over here, I know that this is 2, so I've got to figure out the value of this, and I need it to be 6, so that's going to be 4. And then I can submit it to check my response. And so this is a great one. We see these type of questions all the time on like the MEA, right, or the Empower Me. We see that balance scale kind of problem all the time. So when we get to something like this, there is also a pencil feature. So if I want to do some work out, so I know that these are each worth 3. If I wanted to, I can click this pencil and I can say, so I know the value over here is 6. And then if I have this and I know it's 4, and I need the whole thing to be 6, if I needed to do some work out, there is a pencil option. I could say 4, sorry, plus, oh, I can do something, is going to equal 6. So I know that it's 2. I can submit it. So this one, I really do like the mobile for that practice because I feel like that's something we don't practice enough with students. And it's something that's not as easy to recreate ourselves. We don't often get that balance scale out and have them do that work. So it's a way for them to practice problem solving there.
It's also another way to help reinforce the concept that the equal sign means equivalent on both sides, which is something our students struggle with because they think it's equal is the answer.
So that is the website, the SolveMe. There we go, SolveMe puzzles. So solveme.edc.org. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. And now we're going to shift into some games really quickly. I know we're running out of time, but I want to shift into these games. So there's so many different ways that you can play games with a regular deck of cards. Now, if you happen to have digit cards, you certainly can use those, but I don't have any of those around, so I'm going to use a regular deck of cards. And I've taken out the 10s, queen, kings, and jokers. I have left the aces in, and I'm going to call those ones. And so now the cards are essentially digit cards. They're worth just a digit. And I don't have anything for 0, but I don't want to keep the 10s in because when I'm going to be doing some work, I want these cards to represent a digit that I can make multi-digit numbers with. So in comparing, when you think about compare, it's like the game we used to call war, right? In the single card compare, I flip over a card, you flip over a card, I have a 7, you have a 2, I get to keep them both because I have the larger value. And so that's just kind of the real basic idea of the idea of compare. But you can move that up to a multi-digit compare. So now I'm going to flip 2 cards and you can flip 2 cards. And when we do that, I have an 8 and a 5, and you may have picked up an 8 and a 6. So now I'm going to make the largest 2-digit number that I can make with those cards. So my 8 and 5 is going to become 85. My 8 and 6 are going to become 86. 86 is larger than 85, so 86 gets to keep all of the cards. So it builds on, we're not just comparing now single digit numbers, we have our 10s and 1s. You could even do this as a 3-digit number if you wanted to. You'd each just pick 3 cards. And you could make a variation with that multi-digit, really getting kids to understand about place value. If you decided to, you could say that you wanted to make the smallest number and the person with the smallest value gets to keep the cards. And so that changes how you think about organizing those cards and where you want to put your larger or your smaller numbers. But you would want to decide that before you play the game, obviously. Don't switch it partway through. And then you can get into addition compare. So I'm going to flip 2 cards, and instead of making a multi-digit number, I'm now going to add the 2 digits together. So I have a 4 and a 7, so my value is 11. My partner gets an 8 and a 6, their value is 14. So they get to keep them all because 14 is more than 11. But you can kind of amp this up and now make 2 2-digit numbers. So I pick 4 cards, make my 2 largest digits, largest number, 2-digit numbers, add them together. So you can see how we're increasing the difficulty each time. And you could do the same thing about finding the smallest sum. Just make sure you decide that ahead of time. And it's really about comparing values. So you can add or you can just compare. You can also do subtraction. So a subtraction compare. If I pick 2 cards, I'm now going to subtract them. We do have to be careful about subtracting the 2 cards. You actually could use this with your older students and have your reds be negatives and your blacks be positives, so you could have positive and negative cards. You can add and subtract those, but you could also have students subtract those 2 cards. We know that we can subtract a larger number from a smaller number, but depending on what grade level or age that you're working with, that may not be the point of the game that you want them to play. So you would want to have a conversation about how you would subtract those. What you could do is flip over 3 cards and make a 2-digit number and a single-digit number and then subtract them. And that way you don't worry about getting into negative numbers. With a 2-digit number subtracting a 1-digit, you'll always have something that stays in the positive. You could also, again, switch up this game. A variation could be that you make a 3-digit and a 2-digit number, or you could be looking for the largest difference or the smallest difference. So again, these are just different ways that you can use these cards. Multiplication compare is really the same as addition, but instead of adding the cards together, you are multiplying the cards. And then the largest product would get to keep the cards. You could even do that a 2-digit times a 1-digit number by switching over, by flipping over 3 cards. And then in division, you could also use the cards for division. If I flip over 3 cards, I would then make a 2-digit number and a 1-digit number, and I would then divide. And you can do it a couple of different ways. I know my screen here says to just drop the remainder and use the quotient as what you're comparing. Another way that you could do that is if you make a 2-digit number and a 1-digit number, the remainder could be the number of points that you earn. And you want to earn the fewest number of points. So students have to start thinking about divisibility rules and how they might divide to get different remainders. So they really have to start to know something about number sense, right? If I have the cards 2, 9, and 7, I could make the number 97 and divide by 2. My remainder is only going to be 1. But if I do 27 divided by 9, I don't have a remainder at all. Or if I did 29 divided by 7, my remainder is 1. But if I do 92 divided by 7, my remainder is also going to be 1 in that case. So it depends how the numbers work together, but sometimes you might end up with a remainder that's quite a large remainder. So you can do it where you drop the remainder off and compare the quotient, or you can do it where the remainder is actually the number of points and you're trying to collect less points. Another way that you can use the cards for computation is to play a game where we're going to talk about adding or subtracting. In adding, I'm going to use this kind of game board here. You could also do it with dice, but here's my game board. It's a row, and I'm going to make 2 3-digit numbers to add together, but I flip one card at a time. And so when I flip one card at a time, my first card is a 4. And if I'm looking for the largest sum, I'm going to think about where do I want to put that 4. Once I place that 4 within those 2 3-digit numbers, it stays. I don't get to move it. So since I know that 4 is fairly small, yeah, it's fairly small, I'm going to put it in the ones place. So I'm actually going to put it in this box right here, in this ones place. And then my next number is a 6. So I'm thinking, well, 6 is in the middle. I'm going to put that in the tens place in that top number. My next one is another 4. Well, 4 is kind of small, so I'm going to put this in the ones place of the second number. But now I got a 3. I should have left one of the ones places open, but I didn't. So this 3 is now going to go in the tens place in the bottom number. I now have both hundreds places open, and I'm really hoping for a large number. I got another 3, so I'm going to have to put that in the hundreds place. And this time I got a 9, so I'm going to put that in the other hundreds place. If I had picked a 1, I also have to put it in the hundreds place because that's what I had left. So this game is a little bit about strategy. It's a little bit about luck. And then I have my 2 3-digit numbers, and I'm going to add them together to get the largest sum. Again, you could always change this up because the strategy is going to vastly change if I'm now looking for the smallest sum. So it depends, you know, what do you want your students working on, but you can change up this game so it's not always the same. You could do this with dice. You just roll the die and you get the number and it goes into one of these spaces. You can also do it with subtracting. If you were going to subtract, I might recommend using a 3-digit number and take away a 2-digit number. And that way it doesn't matter kind of where your cards fall. A 3-digit number, you would be able to, because there are no zeros, a 3-digit number, you'll be able to subtract that 2-digit number and not have to worry about the negative numbers in that case. Any questions about those games using a deck of cards? They're really such a versatile tool that most families either have because they have them with other games, or they can pick them up very inexpensively, or maybe even schools have given them out to students. I know I worked in Title I, and when we did our family night, that was always, we gave them like a set of dice, and we gave them a deck of cards, and that way they could play at home, whether it was with other siblings or with their parents. They would have some tools right there at home that they could play with. So it's always an option. The last piece I want to share with you today is another resource. It's actually a printable document that you can send home, or you could send home the link to families. It's on this website here, and I'm going to take us to the website, and I know that it's not super easy to share that, especially if we're watching it as a video. I believe Michelle's working on getting that into the chat box for those of you who are live with us. So I'm gonna wait just a second before I take it down. And I'm gonna wait just another second. She's got it. So it will come up in the chat box for those of you who are live. If not, you can always pause the video to gather it. But we're gonna come back here. And so when you go to this website, this is what it looks like. Kathleen Morris, I believe it's out of, I want to say it might even be like Australia. I noticed that the names of some of the tools that she refers to are slightly different. So I do know that it's not necessarily from the US. But when you scroll down, there's this printable document. It says click here to download the PDF. So when you click on it, it opens up the document. So if you were sending this link home to parents, you could just send the link. But there are 20 games that are really meant for like that K to grade 3-ish age, and they use very basic materials. So there's an introduction to parents. It talks about the games, kind of having fun. It talks about the equipment that they could use. So dice, cards, just anything that they can use for counters. So it kind of reaffirms for parents that they don't have to have all of these things that they find at school. They really can use materials from around their house, such as blocks and papers. This is the icy pole sticks was the thing that gave it away, that they weren't necessarily US. So popsicle sticks and a number chart. But as you scroll down through, there's 20 different games, and the games talk about what skills they're working on, but all the directions are here, as well as pictures on how to play the games that are there. And so there's examples of what that would look like. So it's a great, I think, resource for parents, especially in a, if you're trying to go very low tech and not give computer-based things for students to do. This is a packet that students could have to use with siblings or with their family. I'm going to jump back here. Any questions about that? I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's just another resource, and we're all about sharing resources. It's all free resources. Are there any questions from the materials that we covered today? And if not, I'm going to share with you the link for the survey, and I will also put that link in the chat box, and I have that one right here. There we go. I don't think there's any letters. This one is an L. It's a bit.ly link, or you can scan the code. This survey, once you complete the survey, please be aware that once you complete the survey and you hit submit, you'll be directed to a page that says, thank you for submitting the survey. Click here for your contact hours certificate. So be sure to click the link on the thank you page. It will take you to the document where it's a certificate. You can enter your name and the date, and you can either print it or download and save it to your computer. So we won't be emailing out certificates. You're going to have your certificate right from the link after you submit the survey. And again, so if you don't have a way to print it, you could always download and save the certificate, and that way you could either email it to yourself or open it at another time when you can print. And I will leave this up here so that you can either click the link or you can use this. I am going to take it down.